After 3 years of the pandemic, the restrictions were finally lifted. Xavier's first love returned to China in a hurry. Unfortunately, she became one of the first batch of infected people. Xavier wanted to take my medicine to give to her. I didn't allow it. He said to me disappointedly, "It's a matter of life and death. Why are you making a fuss?" I silently looked at him and then slapped the medicine on the table. "If you want the medicine, fine. 4.7 million yuan. Xavier looked absurd. 4.7 million yuan? Are you crazy? Come on, stop messing around. Give me the medicine first. She's already got a fever of 39 degrees Celsius. I dodged his hand. 4.7 million yuan. You pay the money and then you can take the medicine. Xavier's face darkened and he looked at me with a heavy gaze. A few seconds later, he suddenly turned around and went into the study. Soon, he came out with a bank card. There's 5 million yuan in it. The password is your birthday. Is that okay? Looking at this bank card, I smiled. Of course, the password was my birthday. This was originally my bank card. Okay. I handed the medicine to him. Xavier took the medicine and was about to leave as soon as he turned around. Wait. I stopped him. He paused without looking back. Sylvia, that's enough. Xavier had a bad temper, but he had always been gentle with me. In these 3 years, even when he was extremely angry, he wouldn't talk to me in such a tone. Since Candace came back, this seemed to have become the norm. I lowered my eyes and suppressed the surging emotions in my heart. Sign this. This was a repayment contract. It was originally prepared for Candace. Unexpectedly, it ended up being used on Xavier in the end. After reading the content above, Xavier was stunned for a moment. His expression immediately softened and there was guilt in his eyes. Sylvia, I raised my hand to interrupt him. Sign it, so that you won't say I'm blackmailing you later. Xavier sighed. Sylvia, don't be like this. Candace's parents have all emigrated. She has no relatives in China. I can't just stand by and watch her die. I nodded. So hurry up and sign it and go send her the medicine. Sylvia. Xavier was about to say something else when his phone rang. It was Candace. I snatched his phone and turned on the hands-free. Candace said weakly with a hoarse voice, Xavier, where are you? I'm so uncomfortable. Xavier hurriedly turned off the hands-free. He looked stiff and said softly with his back to me, I'll be there soon. Sylvia, we'll talk about our business when I come back, okay? I'm currently, Xavier, I interrupted him again, sign it, and then you can go wherever you want. Sylvia. Sign it. Xavier held back his emotions to the extreme. He grabbed the pen and signed his name at the end. Before closing the door, he said to me, I'll come back after sending the medicine. Wait for me to come back and then we'll talk. Xavier left. The room was silent. Looking at the contract and the bank card on the table, I let out a long sigh. After going around in circles, I finally took this sum of money after all. 3 years ago, when the pandemic broke out, Xavier's company didn't survive and went bankrupt. However, at this time, Candace took all the money and went abroad. Xavier was almost on the verge of collapse at that time. The debt collectors forced him to the point where he almost jumped off a building. It was I who found him with this bank card. There was a total of 4.7 million yuan. 3.7 million yuan was used to repay the debts and the remaining 1 million yuan was the startup funds I gave him. I hoped that he could make a comeback and he did. 1 year ago, he came to me with this bank card. He said, there's 5 million yuan in it. I'm returning it to you. Now that we don't have a debt relationship anymore, can you be my girlfriend? Since then, I became his girlfriend. But I didn't take the money. Because I thought this money should be repaid by Candace. This was what she owed Xavier. Now it seems that I was being sentimental. I put the contract and the bank card into the compartment of the suitcase and started to pack my things. Fortunately, the cardboard boxes I used when I moved in were still on the balcony and hadn't been thrown away. I moved in 3 months ago. At that time, I was hospitalized due to severe migraines. Xavier was very worried. Sylvia, move in with me. I was surprised and asked him why he suddenly said that. He said, I'm very worried about you. I'm afraid that next time something happens to you, I still won't be by your side. He looked at me with affectionate eyes, making me mistakenly think that I was the love of his life. So much so that I made such an impulsive decision. When my cell phone rang, I was packing the books on the bookshelf. It was Mia. Her voice was loud and urgent as if she had swallowed a dynamite pack. What's going on between you and Xavier? How come he's with Candace? How do you know? Didn't you see Candace's WeChat moments? Oh right, you're not her friend. Wait, I'll send you screenshots. Mia didn't give me a chance to speak at all. In fact, I was Candace's friend. She added me on her own initiative on the day she returned to China. She said to me, Sylvia, thank you for taking care of Xavier all these years. Now that I'm back, you don't need to bother anymore. I thought she was being shameless. Do you think there's anything else to talk about between you and Xavier besides repaying the money? She said, Sylvia, you don't understand. This is a matter between me and Xavier. At the same time, she also sent a picture. Both she and Xavier were in the picture. One was sitting in the passenger seat and the other was driving. At that time, I still had some illusions. So I asked Xavier, were you drinking tea at Brother Rue's place all day today? He said, yes, we talked about something. Mia's screenshots were sent over. It was Candace's WeChat moments. She said, I know you'll wait for me, just like I've been waiting for you all along. The picture was Xavier's profile. He was looking down, holding the medicine in his hand, and didn't even wear a mask. Facing the pandemic, the greatest true love should be that even if you're infected, I'll take care of you without wearing a mask. Hello? Did you see it? I replied, yes, I saw it. That's it? And then? Am I just going to let this pair of scumbags trample all over you? I was helpless. Xavier and I have already broken up. Mia was silent. After a while, she said through gritted teeth, they got off too easy. If it weren't for you back then, Xavier would probably have been dead and buried by now. How could he still be here making you feel bad? What ungrateful bastards. A perfect match, these two. Good that you broke up. Otherwise, you might get infected by them. Candace must have the bitch virus. I couldn't help laughing. Mia sighed, it's good that you can still laugh. Let's go have some skewers tonight. Aren't you afraid of getting infected if you go out? Then come to my place and drink and have hot pot. Okay, that's fine. But I need to move first. Move? How could I miss this with my big pickup truck? Wait, I'll be there soon. Mia's concern slowly warmed my heart. Suddenly, I remembered that I didn't seem to have told Xavier that we were breaking up. So I opened the chat box with him. Xavier, let's break up. Without waiting for his reply, I blocked and deleted all his contact information. For a moment, I couldn't tell whether I felt depressed or relieved in my heart. Or maybe it was both. Mia arrived soon. With her help, it took less than an hour to finish packing. What about the key? She asked. I'll mail it to him later. Mia put her arm around me. You can let go when you should. You're really something, girl. Let's go and have a drink. We bought ingredients, cooked hot pot, and Mia just took 2 caddies of wine that cost 200 yuan per caddy from their small supermarket. We ate and drank while chatting about happy things. My cell phone was stuffed into the crack of the sofa, blinking on and off countless times. In the end, we both got drunk. As a result of our indulgence, we slept until noon the next day. Mia's mother cooked porridge and called us to get up. I felt a bit embarrassed. After finishing the porridge, I was ready to leave. Mia held me back and wouldn't let me go. She kept shouting for me to play with her. But I knew that she was worried about me. She knew best about my feelings for Xavier. From the initial secret crush, to later companionship, and finally being together, she thought that I had finally got what I wanted. Now that it ended so badly, it was really not decent. I smiled and comforted her, don't worry, I'm okay. Mia looked at me with heartache, you always like to keep everything to yourself. I hate this about you the most. What's so good about Xavier that's worth you spending half your life on him? She poked my head. Now that you've broken up, completely forget about him. Don't spoil him anymore. I nodded. Okay, I'll listen to you. Really? She looked suspicious. Really? Can a person suddenly let go of someone they've loved for a long time? I think they can. Just like me with Xavier. 4 days ago, I suddenly stopped loving him. It was right after I had a miscarriage. My menstrual period had always been very regular. This month, because of Candace's sudden return to China, my mood was disturbed. By the time I realized that my period was delayed, it was already 6 days late. I had a bad feeling, so I bought a pregnancy test stick that night. 2 lines, a bit faint. I was stunned. Looking at myself in the mirror, my tears streamed down. It wasn't tears of joy. It was indescribable sadness. That night, there was a heavy rain. Xavier answered a phone call and got up to go out. I asked him where he was going. He said he had something to do. I asked him what it was. He said it was a private matter. Xavier, I'm asking you because I want an answer, not a perfunctory reply. But he said, I don't want to say, that's why I answered like this. Do you have to keep asking? I was hurt by his words. Okay, go ahead. Xavier walked a few steps and then turned back to me. He held my hand and said to me, recently, our emotions have been a bit off. Let's have a good talk when we have time, okay? In the end, he didn't tell me where he went. But if he didn't tell me the answer, someone else would. Candace said, don't worry, he's here with me. She said that she had fallen down and Xavier had carried her into the elevator. Just like when we were in college, when Candace and I both fell down at the same time, he would help me up, but he would carry Candace on his back. That night, it wasn't until 3 o'clock in the morning that Xavier came back, bringing a chill with him. I turned my back to him and pretended to be asleep. The next day, he got up early in the morning and left. He left in a hurry and didn't notice my swollen and red eyes at all. Then I got up and went to the hospital because I had vaginal bleeding. On my way to the hospital, I lost the baby. From the discovery of pregnancy to the miscarriage, it took less than 24 hours. I was at a loss and helpless. Before I had time to think about whether to keep the baby or not, God had already made the choice for me. I asked the doctor why this had happened. The doctor told me it was called a biochemical pregnancy. She said, this is a process of natural elimination. This fertilized egg was not qualified, so your body expelled it out of your body before it implanted. Perhaps my expression was too sad. The doctor comforted me, don't worry. It's normal and quite common. A biochemical pregnancy doesn't even count as a pregnancy experience. For some people who didn't notice it, they just thought it was a menstrual period. After coming out of the consulting room, I sat outside for a long time. I used my mobile phone to search for information about biochemical pregnancy. Someone said, after you have a biochemical pregnancy and lose a baby, you will be especially likely to get pregnant again. So, it came and went in a hurry, not to make you sad, but to remind you that your baby is waiting for you in the future. There were countless comments below saying it was a rumor and there was no scientific proof. But for some reason, I believed it. Just like my relationship with Xavier. Since it wasn't qualified, it should be eliminated naturally. This isn't the abyss of pain but a new beginning. After leaving Mia's house, I started to quarantine myself at home. I'm a freelancer. To be more specific, I'm a writer. For me, it's quite common not to go out for a month or two. I'm used to being alone and living alone. During the period when I moved to live with Xavier, it felt strange to me. I couldn't adapt to his work and rest schedule, and I was even less used to someone suddenly hugging me when I was sound asleep. At first, I couldn't fall asleep all night long. But at the same time, I was happy that Xavier and I were getting closer. Xavier said, Sylvia, it's so nice to have you here. I also thought it was really nice. Slowly, I began to adapt. However, before I could fully adapt, Candace came back. There were dozens of missed calls from the same strange number on my mobile phone. It was Candace's mobile phone number. Finally, there was a text message. Sylvia, could you stop making trouble? Candace and I are just friends. How amazing. Candace abandoned him and kicked him when he was down. It would be okay if he didn't hold a grudge, but he could even forget the past grudges? Even Mia asked me, is Xavier out of his mind? Candace pushed him to the brink of death, but he didn't care at all. Is he crazy? I don't know if he's crazy now, but he was almost driven mad 3 years ago. He held his mobile phone and called Candace day and night. With red eyes, he asked me imploringly, something must have happened, right? She wouldn't treat me like this. He waited for Candace, from hope to disappointment, and finally to despair. I picked him up from cheap restaurants countless times and cleaned up his messes countless times, until I was almost beaten up. He stood in front of me and protected me. He said to me, Sylvia, you're the only one I have left. But what about now? He seemed to have forgotten everything in the past. Sure enough, people only remember the good and forget the bad. Xavier said that matter had nothing to do with Candace. It was Candace's father who deceived her. It said that Candace went abroad because her grandmother was ill and she needed to take care of her. Coincidentally, something happened to Xavier's company at that time. Candace couldn't handle everything at once, so her father offered to solve the problem. Then Candace gave her mobile phone and bank card to her father. Later, her father told her that it had been dealt with. However, her mobile phone was accidentally lost. She could only apply for a new card, and thus lost contact with Xavier. During the 3 years of the pandemic, she couldn't come back. Now that the restrictions have finally been lifted, she rushed back immediately. Mia looked incredulous. Does she think she's in an idol drama? Indeed. This explanation was full of loopholes and couldn't stand scrutiny at all. But Xavier believed it easily. After the biochemical pregnancy, I broke the ice. Candace is back, right? Xavier was pouring water at that time. Hearing my words, the cup fell to the ground with a clang and broke. On the 11th, you said you were having tea at Brother Rui's place, but in fact, you went to the airport to pick her up. Xavier looked at me with complicated eyes. Since you knew it from the beginning, why didn't you say anything? Because I was waiting for you to confess to me, Xavier. He sighed, squatted in front of me, and grabbed my hands. He said, don't overthink it. I'll go to see her just to figure out what happened back then. Have you figured it out? Xavier nodded. He said, she didn't do it on purpose back then. She was also kept in the dark. It was her father who deceived her. After explaining what happened back then, Xavier's expression was one of relief, and there was even a trace of relief on his face. Suddenly, I understood. What Xavier wanted wasn't a reason but an excuse. An excuse that would allow him to easily forgive Candace. This excuse didn't need to be perfect, it just needed to exist. For a moment, it felt like I was stung by a wasp. I suddenly pulled my hands back. Xavier was stunned for a moment. He wanted to approach me, but I got up and backed away continuously. He quickly said, Candace and I have already buried the hatchet. We're just friends now. She came back to China because of me. She has neither relatives nor friends in China. I can't just ignore her. Then you go take care of her. Don't hang around in front of me. It's disgusting. As time passed day by day, more and more people got infected. In the community where I lived, countless people started to have a fever every day. I learned from some clinics, cut ibuprofen tablets into pieces, and pasted them outside the door. Then I sent a message in the owners group. There are ibuprofen tablets on the door of room 1203, Unit 1, Building 10. Take them if you need them. The first person who came to the door was an older sister. She took a one-day dose and left a bag of pears at my door. Later, she sent me a private message. I know you're kind-hearted, but it's hard to buy medicine now. You should still keep some for yourself. I felt warm in my heart. I have many chronic ailments. For example, mouse hand, a condition caused by excessive use of the mouse, cervical spondylosis, and migraine. So ibuprofen tablets are my regular medicine. It was only until now that I realized that it could also reduce fever. Fortunately, I always stock up on medicine in large quantities. In the past, Xavier liked to help me organize the medicine box and replenish the stock. He used to tease me at that time, anyone who knows would think you're stocking up on medicine. Those who don't know would think you're running a pharmacy. At that time, I was a homebody. Except for Xavier and Mia occasionally asking me to go out to relax, I could stay at home all the time. Perhaps that sister set an example. Later, people who came to take medicine at my door would leave something more or less. The things were not valuable or precious, but I was happy to receive them. Until the last dose of medicine was taken away, I informed everyone in the group. But in the evening, suddenly there was a knock on the door. I thought it was someone who didn't see the message and came to take medicine. Then I looked through the peephole and saw that it was Xavier. He was wearing a mask and looked tired. When I looked at him, he looked up at the peephole. "Sylvia, open the door. I know you're in there." I touched my nose, feeling embarrassed as if I had been caught peeping. Through the door, I said, "No, I'm afraid of getting infected." Xavier was stunned for a moment and didn't say anything for a long time. After a long while, he said helplessly, "Candace isn't infected. She just caught a cold, just an ordinary cold." I said, "Oh," dryly, "that's good." Xavier was silent again. I lost the interest to continue looking and turned around to go back to my room. Xavier said, "Sylvia, open the door. Let's have a good talk, okay?" He said. When I went back, I found that all your things were gone. Sylvia, I was so panicked. I stopped in my tracks. Xavier, I've already moved out for 5 days. And he just found out today. Sylvia, it's not what you think. Nothing happened between Candace and me. It's just that she's sick, and I interrupted his eager explanation. Xavier, we've broken up. There was a thud sound from outside the door. Xavier suppressed his voice and growled, "I didn't agree." "Oh, really? Breaking up isn't like getting divorced. It doesn't need your consent. Moreover, Xavier, you should agree. At least in this way, it can be explained that you two, a man and a woman, have been together for 5 days. Otherwise, what's the deal?" Outside the door, Xavier was still explaining that nothing had happened between him and Candace and was still begging me to open the door. I didn't say anything more and went straight into the bedroom. People in the group who heard the noise upstairs and downstairs were all concerned about me, asking if I had encountered any problems and if I needed help. I explained, "It's my ex-boyfriend. It's an emotional dispute. He'll leave soon. It's okay." However, at 11 o'clock, my neighbor upstairs sent me a message. "I just went downstairs to see if your ex-boyfriend had left, but he's still standing at your door. Sylvia, are you sure it's okay? Do you need me to call the police for you?" I was stunned for a moment. 4 hours had passed. Why hadn't Xavier left yet? "It's okay. I'll handle it. Thanks for your concern." To be honest, I was a bit angry. I took Xavier's phone number out of the blacklist. The call was quickly connected. "Sylvia." Xavier's voice was hoarse with a trace of joy. "Why haven't you left yet?" I interrupted him. "Xavier, what do you want?" "Sylvia, can we talk? You can't sentence me to death without saying anything. Isn't knowing when to stop the tacit understanding among adults?" However, Xavier's persistence and stubbornness made me realize that we had to have a talk. "It's too late. Tomorrow. Come over tomorrow afternoon." "Okay." When Xavier came, I did a comprehensive disinfection before letting him in. He wanted to take off his mask but I didn't allow it. Looking at me, he said, "Sylvia, do you have to be like this?" I didn't understand. "What's wrong with me?" He was silent and finally shook his head. "Forget it." I suddenly realized. Could he think that I was deliberately expressing my emotions through these actions? "Xavier," I said, "I'm just protecting myself." Xavier said, "I'm not infected. And even if you get infected, I'll take care of you. You don't have to be so cautious." "Ha!" I laughed. "Candace got sick and you took care of her, and now that I'm sick, you're also taking care of me. Xavier, you're not a doctor." You can't take care of everyone. Xavier's voice gradually became irritable. How many times have I told you that there's nothing between me and Candace? Is it necessary for you to make a fuss about this? Then I'll delete her. I won't contact her ever again. Is that okay? With that, he took out his phone, deleted Candace as a friend in front of me, and then blocked her phone number. Sylvia, come home with me. Let's stop arguing, okay? I looked at him quietly. Xavier, have I ever told you not to choose me when it's a choice between two people? Xavier and I met in high school. We were classmates, desk mates. During those 3 years, there were no earth-shattering events, just a steady stream of ordinary days. We studied together and helped each other. We set the same goal to be admitted to the same university. I thought that we would naturally be together in the future. But then he met Candace. He hesitated. He wavered between me and Candace. I didn't like this, so I pushed him and said, Xavier, don't choose me when it's a choice between two people. Xavier was stunned and subconsciously said, I didn't. I raised my hand to stop him. I took out my phone and opened the chat window between me and Candace. On December 11th, you said you were having tea at Brother Rui's place, but in fact, you went to the airport to pick up Candace. Candace sent me a photo of the two of you and said, Sylvia, thank you for taking care of Xavier all these years. Now that I'm back, you don't need to bother anymore. It's not. Xavier's eyes were flustered. I took a step back. Could you please stop talking? He froze on the spot. On the 12th, you said you had to work overtime and wouldn't come back for dinner, but in fact, you cooked a meal for Candace at her place. Candace said, Xavier's cooking skills have improved a lot. He must often cook for you too. But you definitely haven't tasted his boiled fish. He said he would only cook it for me in his life. But in fact, Candace was overthinking. Xavier had never cooked for me. Xavier tried to defend himself feebly. That day we were talking about what happened back then. She said she wouldn't tell me unless I cooked a meal for her. I let out a light laugh. Then you were restless for 2 consecutive days. You even flew into a rage because I accidentally touched your phone. At that time, you were so annoyed, but later you apologized to me, saying that you were just busy with work and in a bad mood. On the 17th, you accompanied Candace back to our campus. She said, I'm so glad that we're still the same as we were back then. Sylvia, you'll help us get together, right? On the 18th, she went to your company and took a picture of you tying her shoelaces. She said, Sylvia, Xavier and I have never broken up. It's you who got in between us, but I forgive you. On the 19th, she fell down, and you rushed to save her in the rain and carried her back home. She said, don't worry. He's with me. I showed him the content on my phone. You thought I knew nothing, but someone live-streamed everything about you two to me. Given this situation, do you still think I'm just making a fuss? Xavier stared at me blankly, with a broken plea in his eyes. I said, I like to see things through to the end. I don't care what Candace said. I've been waiting for you to give me an explanation, even if it's about breaking up. But what I got was that you used 5 million to buy my medicine. You know what that 5 million means. So, Xavier, don't choose me when it's a choice between two people. Sylvia, I'm sorry. Xavier's voice was hoarse. He said, I know I'm wrong. I beg you, could you give me another chance, please? I shook my head. Xavier, I've always thought that I'm good enough. I deserve to be the one and only, not the second choice. Mia said that I wasted half of my life on you, but that's not the case. Liking you was just a small thing in my life. It didn't prevent me from becoming a better version of myself. When we had the chance to be together, I was willing to give it a try. Now that we've tried and it didn't work out, I don't want it anymore. Xavier left dejectedly. Before leaving, he asked me, can we still be friends? No, I said. To avoid making the next person uncomfortable. We would all have new beginnings, and we surely would. It's time to let go of what should be let go. I blocked all of Candace's contact information too. From now on, their affairs have nothing to do with me. Mia was extremely happy when she found out. I've always said that Xia doesn't deserve you. He must have something wrong with his eyesight if he could fall for a showy person like Candace. I giggled when I heard that. Then doesn't that mean there's something even more wrong with my eyesight? Mia was silent. Finally, she said, otherwise? What do you think? Xavier is the biggest mistake in your life. Originally, she wanted to take me to celebrate, but unfortunately, she became the only remaining labor force in her family. I'm so miserable. I've been taking care of these two old folks all day long, and they still complain that my cooking is not good. It's so unfair. She asked me, aren't you going home to have a look? I said, I called them. They're all fine. There's no need to go back. I've never been close to my family. They were ashamed of me for not having a proper job. They thought that I was just an unemployed person writing at home, so they made up a lot of identities for me outside. Sometimes they even forgot their own lies. As a result, every time I went home, I didn't dare to talk to outsiders for fear that what I said didn't match what they had told others. I started a new piece of writing. I was busy every day and felt quite fulfilled. But then Xavier came to my door again. He was in a very bad state, as if he had drunk a lot of alcohol. He leaned against the door and murmured, Sylvia, let me see you. Let me see you, okay? I didn't open the door and said to him through the door, go away. Don't come again. He didn't leave but put his head against the door. Through the peephole, I saw his hunched back and his slightly trembling shoulders. He seemed very sad. After nearly an hour, he staggered away. Damn it. Xavier sued Candace. This was such a huge piece of shocking news that Sue rushed straight to my door. I sprayed her with alcohol. She turned around to cooperate with me while holding up her phone in front of me. Look, the lawyer's letter that Xavier posted on Moments. I took a glance. He said, everyone should be responsible for their past mistakes. Back in the company, Candace and Xavier were partners. Later, something went wrong, and Candace took away all the money. I suggested that Xavier call the police at that time and freeze her funds on the charge of job-related embezzlement. But Xavier said, forget it. He didn't sue Candace even when he was desperate. 3 years have passed, and they had already buried the hatchet. Why did he do this now? Mia thought it was a complicated situation. Is there something wrong with his mind? I didn't understand what Xavier was trying to do either. Never mind them. Anyway, it has nothing to do with us. Mia nodded. She gloated and said, I really want to see Candace's face now. It must be very interesting. I thought this had nothing to do with me at all. But a week later, I received a large sum of money transferred by Xavier. Looking at the money, I hesitated for a long time. Finally, I dialed Xavier's phone number. Sylvia. His tone was full of joy. I pretended not to notice. I asked him, why did you transfer money to me? There was silence on the other end of the phone for a while. After a long time, he said, part of this money was recovered from Candace, and the other part is the reward for your investment in me. Just take it. Xavier, what on earth are you trying to do? I was a bit irritable. I lent you money because of our years of friendship. If Mia had needed it, I would have done the same. Now that I've got the money back, we're even. Candace's money has nothing to do with me, and neither does yours. Could you please stop doing unnecessary things? Sylvia, I'm sorry. There was suddenly a tremor and a choke in Xavier's voice. He said, I didn't want this. I never thought it would turn out like this. I hoped that we could be together for a long time. I didn't know you were pregnant. Why didn't you tell me anything? I should have known. I clearly saw the needle marks on the back of your hand. I thought you just had a headache and went for an infusion. Why did I just leave like that? How could I not ask you a single question? I felt a pang in my heart. So he knew. Xavier, that wasn't really a pregnancy. What? A biochemical pregnancy, understand? It was just an embryo that hadn't implanted yet. It was unqualified and didn't meet the standards, so it was naturally eliminated. It has nothing to do with you. I hadn't intended to tell him, but I didn't expect that he already knew. Xavier was silent for a long time. It was so long that I thought he had hung up. So I took the initiative to say, Xavier, that's it. Stop doing unnecessary things. I'll return the money to you. Sylvia, Xavier suddenly stopped me. If it hadn't been bad, would you have kept it? No. I didn't even hesitate. So, Xavier, we should both be glad. Glad that there wouldn't be too big a regret between us. I returned the money to Xavier. He didn't contact me again. As for Candace, I heard that she left in disgrace. Because Xavier threatened her, if you show up in front of me again, I'll make your father go to prison. How satisfying. Mia said in a hoarse voice. She got infected with COVID-19. Her throat felt like swallowing blades, and she had such a high fever that she almost felt like ascending to heaven. But she still couldn't resist her curiosity. I helplessly asked her if she needed medicine. She joked with me, the kind that costs a fortune? I said, the kind that's priceless. 11 extra story, Xavier, when did Xavier start to regret? It was when Sylvia told him for the second time not to choose her when it was a choice between two people. He liked Sylvia. He was very clear about this. However, Sylvia's personality was too quiet. She could sit in the library all day long or stay up all night working on a manuscript. She didn't have particularly prominent hobbies. Apart from herself and Mia, she didn't even have friends. Besides Sylvia, it seemed that one could see the end at a glance, but Candace was different. She was enthusiastic, lively, and full of wits. Being with her was exciting and vivid. Xavier enjoyed the passion when he was with Candace. However, when the passion faded and things quieted down, he hoped to find peace with Sylvia. Xavier once confided his distress to his friend. After listening, his friend burst out laughing. I understand. Candace is suitable for dating, while Sylvia is suitable for marriage. His words were very straightforward but hit the nail on the head. Xavier didn't know what to do. But Sylvia helped him make the decision. She made Xavier choose Candace. She said, Xavier, don't choose me when it's a choice between two people. That was the first time. Now it was the second time. Xavier regretted it. Xavier hated Candace quite a lot. Candace had ruined him, and it was Sylvia who rebuilt him. However, when Candace contacted him and when she humbly begged for his forgiveness, he actually felt a perverted sense of pleasure. He listened to Candace's explanations full of loopholes. At that moment, he understood that what he needed was not an explanation or to let go, but revenge. He wanted to watch Candace play those self-righteous little tricks in front of him. She thought her words had deceived him. But in fact, in his eyes, those words and actions were just like a clown. He gave Candace hope, making her think that they could get back together. But in the end, he would tell Candace, you fool, I was lying to you. Xavier was addicted to the game with Candace. He thought he was the one in control, but he didn't expect to lose everything in the end. Xavier had already planned it out. He couldn't possibly analyze his ugly heart to Sylvia. But nothing improper would happen between him and Candace. If Sylvia found out, he could say, nothing happened between us. You're just overthinking it. If Sylvia still wouldn't let it go, then he could accuse her of being unreasonable. After all, he really hadn't done anything to let Sylvia down. However, he didn't expect that Candace would send so many provocative messages to Sylvia. What's more, he didn't expect that Sylvia wouldn't even give him a chance to argue. He was directly sentenced to death. Sylvia said, Xavier, I've always thought I was good enough. I deserve to be unique, not to settle for second best. Xavier knew that Sylvia had always been outstanding, so outstanding that he had once wanted to break her invincible image. Sylvia was self-restrained, self-disciplined, not tempted by anything, and focused wholeheartedly on what she wanted to do. Just as she said, love was only a small part for her. She had been constantly striving to become a better version of herself. It was so enviable. Xavier wanted to pull her down from the pedestal, to make her become an ordinary person like himself. It was Candace who dispelled this idea of his. She said, Sylvia is so pretentious. There's really no need for her to set up an image of a top student for herself. Most of her success is due to opportunities. Others could achieve the same if they had the same chances. Her words were so harsh. They made Xavier lose his temper for the first time. Others can't. Only Sylvia can. You only saw what she had, but didn't see what she had sacrificed. She spent her best years on that hard and thankless task. Everything she has now is well deserved. How dare he? How dare he think of breaking Sylvia's invincible image? Such a wonderful Sylvia was too good for him. But it didn't matter. After dealing with Candace, he would go and win her back. He was willing to pester her relentlessly. This was what Xavier thought at first. But despair came too quickly. He met Dr. Zhou from the clinic. Dr. Zhou asked him, "Where's your girlfriend? Why hasn't she come to get an infusion these days? This anti-inflammatory injection needs to be given for a week. Having a miscarriage is like having a mini confinement after childbirth. You should still pay more attention. Especially now, during this special period, don't let her get infected. Otherwise, if her body is weakened, it will be troublesome in the future." At that instant, Xavier felt dizzy. He remembered. When he went home to get medicine from Sylvia, he clearly saw the needle marks on her hand from the infusion, but he didn't pay attention. He thought her migraine had recurred. He didn't even ask one more question. His game with Candace was about to be won. He and Sylvia still had a lot of time. He could coax her slowly later. But there was no chance anymore. Nothing was left. Hate. Bitter hate. For himself and for Candace. In the end, he transferred all this hatred onto Candace. Candace asked him with a distorted expression, "Why are you treating me like this?" Xavier said, "I've been lying to you all along. Why do you think I would still be with you after what you've done?" However, looking at the furious Candace, Xavier didn't feel any satisfaction. His heart seemed to have been hollowed out. He said, "You should never, ever have hurt Sylvia." But Candace laughed. "I hurt her? Yes, I hurt her. But Xavier, it was you who gave me the chance." Faced with Xavier's tough measures, Candace was scared. She easily took out that sum of money. This was the most important step. Xavier thought that he should have done this when he first met Candace. He just needed to get that money back. Instead of going around in circles and doing so many unnecessary things. And that contract, it was originally prepared by Sylvia for Candace. Why did he sign it? What on earth had he done? Xavier transferred Candace's compensation and most of his own fortune to Sylvia. He was atoning for his sins to Sylvia. He was also asking Sylvia for a chance. He was unwilling to give up. But Sylvia said that even if the child had been fine, she wouldn't have wanted it. There was no room for negotiation. Xavier finally understood. He had lost.